Hello, Andy. It's very nice to have you on our show. And we will talk about the EV industry today. And recently, a spokesperson for China's Ministry of Commerce have said that EU-China anti-subsidy case regarding Chinese electric vehicles have seen some new progress, taking a significant step towards right direction. How do you see the possibilities of the two sides reaching agreement on a price undertaking or a tariff exemption?
Tariffs are very topical, aren't they, with both the EU, with the UK and with the US, of course. Tariff is bad for the car industry. Right. Tariff is inflationary. Tariff is paid by the consumer, not by the company. Right. So it will increase the price of the vehicle. And consequently, if you increase price, the price of car is very elastic. So it will reduce the volume, which is very bad news for the car maker. The other thing that tariff does is it insulates the car maker from the realities of competition. And the reality here is that Chinese cars have dramatically improved in quality over the last decade. And the reality is that they're able to be priced at very competitive pricing. And the European industry needs to be exposed to that. It's good for the consumer first. So for all of those reasons, I think the closer you can get to zero tariff, the better it is for the consumer, the better it is for the Chinese maker, and the better it is for the European maker.
So how do you think the negotiation results will influence the strategic move for European automakers? For example, will they expand their local manufacturing layout?
Those car companies will react against certainty. One of the big issues you have right now is there is a lot of uncertainty in the world. Yes. Is the US tariff this? Is the Chinese tariff this? And nobody will make investment decisions in the face of uncertainty. You know, to develop a new car is perhaps $1 billion. Right. Maybe on every car, the car maker is making $100 or $200. Very small margin per car. And so any movement of tariff, any movement of costs is very volatile to the profitability. So it's better to wait. Now, what I hope, of course, is that the UK, which sits outside of the EU right now, where there isn't any tariff, I hope that the reciprocation of that will be Chinese investment into the UK.
To deal with the tariff hike, some of the EU automakers, they will expand their local manufacturing layout. Some will seek technology breakthroughs to relieve their reliance on Chinese partners. Is it viable in the near future, you think, that solution?
Both solutions will have their advocates. Some will win, some will lose. Clearly, I think if there is no tariffs, then that will initially encourage export from China to the EU. Some may complain about that. In the longer term, however, I believe that the European makers will become more lean, will become more competitive, and that will give them an advantage in the other direction. And ultimately, I call it Darwinism. It's the survival of the fittest. Take away the barriers, let the dogs fight, and the best dog will win.
So is the restructuring is on the way, you think, for the whole industry?
Oh, for sure. Look, most car companies are working on the assumption that they have to react. We can see the technology change. We can see the advancements of China. There's no hiding from that. So whilst the automakers may complain and they may lobby and they may push, of course, at the same time, they are also seeking to improve. They have to improve because ultimately tariffs cannot protect against poor technology.
So you've stated that electric vehicles should be free from subsidies as soon as possible. Why do you hold that view?
Every consumer wants their best quality at the lowest price. Tariffs, in spite of what some people say, tariff is a tariff on the end customer.
Yeah.
So it goes directly to price, which makes the vehicles less affordable. So that's bad for the consumer, but it's also bad for the automaker because it reduces volume. And we all need volume. So from my point of view, the win-win is basically no tariffs. Free trade in both directions.
We've seen the reports that the Chancellor of Exchequer of the UK have stated the UK want to strengthen its partnership with China and that the UK rejects decoupling from China. Is it a policy shift?
Well, what I do know is that the car industry is interlocked. It's a global industry, and that very clearly, if we're not relying on cars from China, we're certainly relying on parts. And if one thinks to electric cars, even more so, because many of the battery components and the raw materials are coming from China. So being interlocked is an inevitability of our industry. What I hope that Chinese industry will take from that discussion is that the UK can be a reliable partner for collaboration and even investment into the UK, because that's a win-win for the UK as well as for China.
But if the statement of the Chancellor is a shift, how do you see the impact of the shift, especially on the supply chain of the whole industry?
I said the supply chain from China is really important. We already can see some tension around rare earth and some of the minerals that are refined in China. Again, those kind of issues are generally resolved through good collaboration, good communication. And so what I hope our Chancellor is doing, what I believe she is doing, is keeping those channels of communication open, making sure that she's looking for the best deal for the United Kingdom, and hopefully that means good collaboration with China.
So let's talk about the collaboration. We are seeing a certain portion of electric taxis are produced by Chinese companies in the UK side.
So you actually see with the taxis, the London taxis, the iconic taxi, a great example of collaboration.
Yeah.
You're seeing a Chinese company that has invested in the UK, is creating jobs in China, is creating jobs in the UK to the satisfaction of the consumer. I think if you're looking for a model, the taxi is one of the models of good collaboration. One can also say the same about London buses, because very clearly BYD has a good supply of buses to London, previously through its collaboration with ADL, now by itself. And again, it generally shows the success of commerce when you have a good, open collaboration model.
Apart from the public transportation like taxis, like buses, where do you see more sectors for our two countries to collaborate?
I would really love to see car making coming into the United Kingdom. If one looks to the 1980s and the rise of the Japanese, the UK was the first country to really welcome Japanese manufacturing and proved how good that can be. The Chinese industry is coming to the same point, and I sincerely believe that a good place to put manufacturing of Chinese vehicles in Europe is to put them in the United Kingdom for reason of English law, for reasons of language, and for reasons of efficiency.
So apart from the car makers, I've seen more areas such as battery technologies.
Look,
self-driving technologies.
I give you an example from my current business, which is battery energy storage solutions. Here, the opportunity to do final assembly in the United Kingdom using cells and componentry coming from China, managed by, in this case, it's Palmer Energy uses a company in Oxford for its battery management. Perfect collaboration of software coming from the United Kingdom, much of the hardware coming from China, bringing together and satisfying the UK market. And Palmer Energy is finding great success based upon that collaboration model.
Speaking of the new technologies, how do you see the potential growth of robotaxi or self-driving technologies?
Wow, that's a really tricky question. I've been working on autonomous vehicles for more than 10 years. And the technology is advancing constantly. The UK just yesterday opened up the possibility of using autonomous vehicles on the public road, and that's the next step in terms of consumer confidence in the technology and of course regulation confidence. So it is coming. it is coming. Probably the first use case is commercial vehicles, which could include taxis. And I think depending on the success of that will depend upon the so-called use of level 4 and level 5 autonomy in our normal passenger vehicle in the future. I don't think we'll see that until probably 2030, but the first step is definitely this kind of robo-taxi or robo-van or robo-truck.
Traditionally, we think the automobile is a narrow industry with high entry barrier. But nowadays, we see a lot of tech giants are entering this industry. So how do you see their winning chances?
It's a really interesting discussion. Tesla, of course, being one of those, but you can see on the roads of China, you can see new manufacturers popping up all over the place. I think there are opportunities for technology startups, but I think generally speaking, they're better focused as a supplier to the car industry. At the end of the day, car making is hard.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not just about the superficial allocation of AI onto a car. You still have to have 4 wheels, a suspension system, a car that can handle properly, a car that can crash safely, a car that doesn't sound noisy. So those fundamentals of car making, which have taken 100 years of evolution, are hard to follow. But likewise, what is hard for the car companies to do is to bring consumer technology like AI into the car. So the perfect marriage is a marriage of the two. Right. I think that does not preclude the possibility of new car companies coming out of the tech center, but you're going to see some succeed and you're going to see some fail, as you have already.
Maybe AI empowers everything. So in your mind, what would be the future of AI plus automobile?
So we talk in the industry about software-defined cars. So this means that software becomes more and more important. It becomes important to the consumer in what you expect from cars. More autonomous driving, more inter-car communications, crash protection. Historically, car makers use a methodology which is called a waterfall, which is basically you have milestones of development which are normally months apart, and you work towards them and you make the hard tooling that presses the door, etc., etc. The software side of things is done in a much different way. It's done in an agile development where you have sprints of normally 2 weeks. So bringing these two types of development, the software development which uses one way, the hardware development which uses another, this is an evolution that the car companies need to go through.
So do you think the software way over than the hardware?
No, I think it has to integrate both. So I think it's more complex than saying we're going to develop cars using an agile method, because you can't. You can't prove out the suspension system of a car just by doing two-week sprints. So I think there is simply a new way, which means that whether it's a software company developing a vehicle or it's a vehicle company developing software, there has to be a merging of minds, and that those companies need to find out what the best way of developing cars is. What's clear is that the consumer has very high expectations of the way that software interacts with them.
Right. And we will talk about China. China's EV industry has made rapid growth in the recent years.
Yes.
So what key factors do you believe drove that success or achievement?
One thing that I have really admired for a long time is the long-term planning of China. I think I can go back to 1992 when the Chinese government decided that it would embark upon a move towards new energy vehicles. That long-term plan has basically allowed the manufacturers to have certainty. And as I said earlier in the interview, car makers crave certainty. And so the government, working together with your car makers, have allowed that to happen. That's something that's really admirable. And I think sometimes the West is a little bit too short-termist in the way that it approaches its investments, whereas China has shown that longevity of thinking.
We've talked about the technologies and talked about the markets. So let's move to talk about the policies. How do you think our two nations can better align our industrial policy to boost the EV industry together?
It's mutual interest, isn't it? It's mutual interest and good communications. There are other industries where it's more difficult, but at least in the car industry, we know how to solve it. And so nations need to work together, because climate change is real, and it doesn't matter whether you live in Beijing or London, climate change will affect you in a bad way. And so what I find in the UK is a lot of resistance to electric vehicles, not because necessarily people hate electric vehicles, but because they're being told that they have to drive electric vehicles. Whereas I think it's much more compelling if you sell the benefit. Electric vehicles are cheaper to run, they're fun to drive. That's sometimes a more compelling argument than simply it's helping to save the world.
And you are acclaimed as the father of electric vehicle, and you've witnessed several revolutionary changes of the industry. So what major breakthroughs are you foreseeing of the EV industry?
You know, when I was lucky enough to be leading the architecture of the Nissan Leaf, which is arguably the first mass production electric vehicle, at that time we were thinking of only changing the powertrain. We thought that was already radical. But the interesting thing about electric cars is that they completely change the architecture of the car. I think the breakthrough in cars comes with the exploitation of the EV technology to change the way that the car looks. And one of the things that I'm optimistic about, particularly as I look on the streets of China, is I see car companies, for example, like Li, starting to think about an MPV in a different way. And I'm really excited that people are starting to challenge those boundaries.
So the last questions, how do you think China and the UK, our two countries, to join hands to advance the EV industry? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, it's always about understanding, mutual understanding and mutual respect. So to say, for example, Chinese quality is bad, or UK workers are expensive, these are misconceptions. Misconceptions are best treated in communication, and therefore I'm really happy that our countries are talking to each other through the political channels to widen that understanding. And again, I hope that the UK can lead the way in terms of how it collaborates with China, that other countries can then follow.
Okay, thank you for your time.
It's my great pleasure.
Wonderful interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.